Sumerian civilization is considered to be one of, if not the oldest civilization in human history. Apart from perhaps the Aboriginal Australians, Sumerian people were some of the first to ever create what we now view as some sort of ordered civilization on Earth. They existed between the 6th and 5th millennium BC, some 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus, and have taught historians a lot about how ancient civilization worked and how this has impacted upon the modern day. The fascinating thing about history is that everything has influenced the way that we live in the present. History impacts everything and everyone, and Sumerian civilization and the mysteries that come with it are no different. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 Sumerian mysteries. The origins of human beings. Religion versus science is a never-ending debate when it comes to the topic of the creation of life on Earth. Ancient civilizations did not have the same concept of religion as we do in the modern day, but they did have gods and divine theories of creation. The Sumerians were spiritual people, and whilst much of their civilization was based upon never-before-seen advances in human society, they did believe strongly in the all-being and all-seeing. In fact, the Sumerians split themselves into cities each guarded by a god, of which they had many. The Sumerian myth of the creation of the world, referred to at the time as the Enuma Elish, refers to human gods ruling the earth as it began. They did the labor that was required to make the world suitable for human civilization, such as mining minerals and cultivating the soil. The tablet upon which the myth is inscribed was discovered in 1849 by English archaeologist Austen Henry Lanyard. It lay in the ruins of the library of Ashurbanipal, which was located in northern Iraq, thought to be part of the area of the Middle East that Sumerian civilization grew from. The first lines on the tablet alluded to the idea of the gods ruling and that they would cultivate the earth, saying, "When in the height heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name, and the primeval Apsu who begot them. And Chaos, Tiamat, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen, when of the gods none had been called into being, and none bore a name, and no destinies were ordained. Then were created the gods in the midst of heaven. Lamu and Lahamu were called into being." But the tablet explains that the gods quickly grew tired of their labor, and Anu, who had the god of the gods, decided that they needed a hand. They then created man to labor for them by sacrificing a good and mixing his blood with clay. This is an idea that the Sumerians believed in devoutly, as they truly viewed themselves as slaves to the gods. The Sumerian myth then draws parallels with Christianity, saying that the first man was created in Eden. This was the garden referred to in the Epic of Gilgamesh that was home to the gods. However, some of the gods realized that humans could not reproduce and thus gave them the ability to do so. But this did not go down well between the gods, and a conflict ensued between them. Scholars point to similarities between this story and that of Adam and Eve, but it's not been verified as to whether this served as a basis for the Christian story. As such, the intrigue surrounding the creation of life goes on. The Great Flood. We have already discovered that there may be a connection between Sumerian mythology and the Christian Bible. Many people across the world will know the story of Noah's Ark. If you are not familiar with it, Noah's Ark is the tale illustrated in Genesis, one of the books of the Old Testament, of God instructing Noah to build an ark to save himself, his family, and examples of all the world's animals from an impending great flood. Noah ultimately succeeded and saves mankind and the animals from the flood. But what exactly is the flood? The flood myth is a myth in which an almighty figure sends a great flood to destroy mankind in some sort of divine revenge against a sin. As well as being depicted in Christianity, there is a version of the story of Noah's Ark in the Quran of Islam and other Abrahamic religions. The Sumerians alluded to the Great Flood in their tablets. In their story, the god Enlil decided that the humans that the god Enki had created had become too noisy and decided to wipe them out with a great flood. Enki warned the hero Upnapishtim, equivalent to Noah, to create a giant ship named the Preserver of Life. He does this and successfully saves mankind, again much like Noah. The noise that was angering the gods can be interpreted in different ways. For example, some believed that this means that humans were defying the power of the gods, and the gods then executed bloodthirsty, ruthless punishment against them. This is actually a fairly common theme amongst Sumerian myths. The clay tablets of the Sumerians told this story, saying, "Enlil heard their noise and addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too intense for me. With their uproar I am deprived of sleep. Cut off supplies for the peoples. Let there be a scarcity of planet life to satisfy their hunger. Adad should withhold his rain, and below the flood should not come up from the abyss. Like any ancient mysteries, we cannot be sure whether these things actually happened, as with a lot in religion. The collected evidence only tells us so much, and of course it is important to keep in mind the evidence is thousands and thousands of years old. Unanswered questions are frustrating. History throws a lot of them up. But one thing is for sure, these mysteries are really quite fascinating. The mystery of the Anunnaki, our third and final mystery, takes us on an exploration of the Anunnaki, powerful Sumerian gods who were said to control the destinies of humankind and were believed by some to be actual human beings, as reflected in their description as children of the earth and sky. Although there is strong evidence of their existence on Earth, all those thousands of surround these ancient religious entities, with much being written about these otherworldly gods and their role in our own creation. One theory classifies the Anunnaki as extraterrestrial beings, ancient astronauts from another planet. In the infamous book The 12th Planet, published in 1976, Zecharia Sitchin proposes his theory on the origins of humanity, that the Anunnaki came from the planet Nibiru and were sent to God to mine gold, and created the first humans to mine gold using pieces of their own DNA. In his book, Slave Species of the Gods, The Secret History of the Anunnaki and Their Mission on Earth, Michael Tellinger supports Sitchin's theory by revealing physical proof in the form of new archaeological evidence of the Anunnaki's presence on Earth. This included ancient sites in South Africa which agree with Sumerian descriptions of the Anunnaki mines were located and the system of tunnels leading to gold mines. Generic Sigdal, in his book Reign of the Anunnaki, The Alien Manipulation of Our Spiritual Destiny, which studies ancient descriptions of the Anunnaki that shows them resembling winged reptiles or amphibians in support of claims that the Anunnaki were a species of reptilian beings. Others yet believe that the Anunnaki are still around to this day, wielding power over humankind. Whatever the truth about these early aliens, the debate continues to rage as to their possible continued existence with, as recently as last year, conspiracy theorist David Icke claiming their connection to the worldwide pandemic. Yet an even bigger question remains to this day. Do the Anunnaki still exist? And if they do, where are they and do they continue to control man's fate? Where then does the truth about these mystifying beings lie? One of the most fascinating things about Sumerian civilization is its parallels with modern-day religious stories. Despite living thousands of years before Christ, the Sumerians' way of life was very advanced in its own respect despite not being fully understood. However, some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. So what do you make of these Sumerian mysteries? Our history across every culture and nation is incredibly rich. New things are always being discovered and revealed, and we learn more and more about those who came before us. Each time a new finding is made, stumbling across peculiar or unusual artifacts and locations, deep into the knowledge we already have, allowing us to delve further into the past and understand just how far we've come. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 historical discoveries. Grave of the Tory Burn, which found in Scotland. The year 2014 saw the discovery of the grave of Lilias Addy, one of many women tortured to confession during early modern Europe's witch craze. In 1704, Lilias Addy confessed to witchcraft. Lilias was born, raised and accused in Toryburn, Scotland, earning her the title the Toryburn Witch. All set her towards a predisposition of being accused of witchcraft. Many women were ill-treated into confession, regardless as to whether or not they were actually guilty. If you believe in witchcraft and think it's a dark art that we ought to be wary of, or if you think the witch hunts represented misogyny in a blatant manner, the impact of these witch trials lingers even in the 21st century. Admitting to engaging in close relations with the devil himself. The outrageous confession meant that Lilias was set to undergo a similar protocol and meet the same fate as over 200,000 other European witches, imprisoned, put on trial, and ultimately be sentenced consequently, losing her life due to being burned at the stake. Lilias, however, passed away imprisoned for what any of this could happen, giving her an arguably more peaceful way to lose her life. She was then given a haphazard burial being labeled in the dirt along the edge of the coast. With beliefs in witchcraft being so strong, one of the believed powers of the devil and those who worshipped him was the ability to raise the deceased, or for them to act as vessels to complete tasks the devil desired. To prevent Lilius from being able to rise like this, her body was covered by a large rock slab. At least this is the explanation contemporary historians have provided as to the peculiar above the body. It wasn't until we were approaching the end of the 19th century when pieces of this accused which were dug up and sold, one of the body parts being her skull. The skull of Lilius was for a brief period of time held in the St. Andrews University Museum. Here it was photographed and treasured before it went missing. Similarly, historians had never formally found the grave of this woman, with it officially having been considered lost. However, in 2014 Douglas Spears and his archaeological team under Fife Council tracked down the distinctive stone slab, using descriptions and research from the 19th century to guide them to the grave. Spears, although he is unable to confirm, speculates there is a high possibility that some of the remains of this alleged which are underneath the slab to this day. Despite having found this gravesite, the location of Lilia's skull remains unknown. It's yet to resurface after having gone missing from the museum. This mystery is yet to be solved. It seems as though each time we answer one question, we're left with another in its place. Archaeologists lift 3,000-year-old statue of Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II. In 2017, archaeologists in Egypt uncovered a large statue of Pharaoh Ramesses II from northeastern Cairo. The torso of this ginormous ancient statue was pulled from a ditch by a team of Egyptian and German archaeologists. The statue has the potential to be one of the most important discoveries in recent history, according to Khaled al-Anamni, the Egyptian Minister of Antiquities. The depiction of this famous pharaoh reaches a stunning 26 feet tall. This fascinating and bizarre artifact was found near the ancient city of Heliopolis, or at least the ruins of what was once a major Egyptian city. Scientists, archaeologists, and historians are operating under the assumption this statue has the potential to be over 3,000 years old. Initially, the statue was lifted with good old-fashioned, trusty teamwork, pulled out by excavators. Many members of the public remained unimpressed at this haphazard, reckless treatment of a relic, artifact, and statue that holds such a significant cultural and historical meaning. The outcry and pressure from the public to make more conscientious decisions was reflected in the employment of a crane to lift the torso of this statue out of the ditch it was concealed within. Soon after, plans were underway for the statue of Pharaoh Ramesses II to be displayed in the Grand Egyptian Museum, following thorough analysis and evaluation of the sculpture. In 2018, the exhibition opened, with the statue visible close to the Great Pyramids of Giza. It's in the Grand Egyptian Museum that the statue is planned to be assembled, piecing together the segments of the statue that have been revealed so far. Khaled al-Anani gave an inside glimpse of the excitement captured as the statue was unveiled. The quartzite statue was quickly identified as a possibility of a depiction of Ramesses II with the initial excavation. A bust, lower part of the head, crown, right ear, and a section of the right eye were found. However, will we find the rest of this fascinating statue in upcoming years? The German partners to this mission, affiliated with the University of Leipzig, also uncovered a smaller 80-centimeter statue, believed to be an upper body of Pharaoh Seti II, the man who assumed the pharaoh role following Ramesses II as he was his grandson. Pharaoh Ramesses II held the title of Ramesses the Great, reflecting the vast power and control he had over ancient Egypt. This man, assumed dubbed the Great Ancestor by generations to follow, was a strong leader, marching Egypt through many missions, plenty of military nature. His influence extended beyond Egypt and the Egyptian Empire, all the way to eastern Syria and southern Nubia. It's no wonder his actions have been immortalized in a statue of this level of grandeur. Will we be able to continue to complete this puzzle, stumbling across the remaining pieces of this statue in order to rebuild this artifact? Or have we exhausted this excavation site, indicating there's a new research for us to enjoy elsewhere? The mummy found inside Buddha. Recent research has found the mummified remains of a monk that have been discovered within a Buddha statue, nearly 1,000 years old. The mummy was concealed with the statue, made with papier-mâché and painted within gold. Current analysis leads researchers to believe the remains belonged to a Buddhist master at the Chinese meditation school named Lu Quan. Lu Quan's estimated year of passing is 1100, meaning his mummy has been concealed for centuries. This discovery made scientific history, as Lu Quan has officially become the first Chinese Buddhist mummy to have research conducted upon it within Western societies. Prior to this research, the mummy had been displayed as one aspect of the Drenth Museum. This is a process that took years to undergo, an incredibly excruciating process. It's presented by this museum that Lu Quan self-mummified, having starved and dehydrated himself, as well as poisoning himself intentionally and meditating throughout this traumatic experience. The complicated process was thought to have allowed individuals to become enlightened. Many Buddhist monks completed these tasks. When the exhibition at Drenth Museum ended, the Buddha was taken for research purposes. A CT scan confirmed a skeleton was present within the Buddha, in a seated position. A less anticipated revelation was the discovery of paper scraps, written on in ancient Chinese characters found within the organ cavities. These messages and the respect demonstrated suggests that the individual inside this Buddha, still believed to be Lu Quan, was a monk of high status, position and authority, possibly having been worshipped within his lifetime as a Buddha. Critics argue that the recent findings here are not a revelation, simply reiterating the established fact there's a mummy within the Buddha, citing the fact that the relic was included in the mummies exhibition in the Drenth Museum as evidence to support these claims. It was in fact in the Netherlands in 1996 that the statue was first revealed to contain a skeleton. This is where he was restored, the age determined, and the first preliminary skeletal imaging was undergone. Latest reports indicate that despite the established presence, we continue to wait for DNA results, obtained from bone samples. The Dutch research team intend to publish these findings as soon as it is possible to do so. As of yet, there's still a large ongoing debate as to whether or not this particular monk mummified himself. Whilst there is lots of speculation and this was an established practice at the time, there's very little we can confirm in this specific instance. Our history continues to shock and amaze us, as we see old artifacts and items relive their stories again, as we uncover the truth about our ancestors and the societies that came before our century. So what do you make of these astonishing historical discoveries? Paranormal stories have become increasingly popular over the years. Usually they are centered around the life of someone who has experienced or encountered something that can provide an explanation for something unexplainable. So today, we'll be taking a look at 3 mysterious individuals who have lived unique and interesting lives with stories to share. Al Bielek and the Philadelphia Experiment. The first person we are taking a look at is Al Bielek. He claims to have been at the very center of the Philadelphia Experiment, which may be one of the biggest conspiracy theories of the 20th century. If you are unfamiliar with the Philadelphia Experiment, it's an event that took place in 1943 when the United States Navy supposedly teleported the USS Eldridge from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. The ship was made invisible and just appeared at its final location. During the trip from one state to the next, some men were said to have gone missing, whilst others ended up becoming fused to the ship itself. With such an outlandish story, it's difficult to believe such a thing really happened. Al Bielek claims to have been a part of this experiment and has shared many details regarding the events that may or may not have that could be verified, as well as specifics on the people and places that were involved. Bielek has made further claims that Nikola Tesla was part of the experiment and that 2 men were sent 40 years into the future and then returned back to the ship. Whilst that alone is crazy to think about, he also believes that these types of experiments date back to 1931 when Tesla had found a way to make objects invisible. Bielek also explains that he and his brother were commissioned in 1983 to travel in between this wormhole to destroy all of the equipment that was on the USS Eldridge. They apparently had to go back to the past to avoid their arrival in 1983 that was causing many problems. When attempting to go back in time, they claimed to have accidentally ended up in 2137, spending many weeks in a hospital bed recovering from burns they endured during their teleportation. Bielek then was said to have traveled to 2749, spending 2 years living in that time period. Aside from this travel to the future, Bielek stated that there were many floating cities that could be transported to other parts of the planet. In this world, the population was apparently only 300 million people, and he explained that it was because only few could adapt to this new environment. There were no military or soldiers or any conflict between countries. were also no government systems in place and computers had eliminated all physical labor. Money was also not needed in this future world where people had credits they could use to buy anything they needed, whenever they needed it. Although Bielik's stories about the future certainly sound interesting, he has been unable to truly prove that he was involved in the Philadelphia experiment and that any of what he said is real. Do you think he experienced all these things, or was he making it up? Could he have perhaps experienced these things in his mind, but not in the physical world? Until others come forward to back his beliefs, it will be challenging for him to find those that believe his word as truth. Andrew Bayago claims the U.S. sent him on time travels. Our next mysterious individual is none other than an attorney who claims he was part of a time travel program as a child. Andrew Bayago has been publicly claiming that he participated in Project Pegasus from the ages of 7 to 12. The secret project was said to be run by the government and it worked on teleportation and time travel. Bayago explains that they were training children among adults to test the mental and physical effects of time travel on both children and adults. He claims that children were at an advantage to adults because they could adapt to the moving between the past, present, and future much more easily than adults could. Ever since publicly announcing his so-called experience with time travel, there have been many skeptics. Many physicists, such as Hong Kong's Shang Wangdu, had stated that time travel is impossible at this time because nothing can move faster than the speed of light. With that being said, there have been some claims that support Bayesiago's story, such as that of Alfred Webre, who is a lawyer that specializes in exopolitics. Exopolitics consists of the political implications of the extraterrestrial presence on Earth. He strongly believes that time travel has been around for over 40 years, but the Defense Department is hoarding the technology instead of putting it to good use. Webre further explains that this mode of transportation is inexpensive and environmentally friendly, which leaves us questioning why it would not be used if the technology was available. He claims that it was used years ago to send troops to battle, but no one has yet to prove that theory. Returning to the life of Bayago, he apparently experienced 8 different time travel technologies during the program. The main device he used was a teleporter that was based on the drawings found by Nikola Tesla after he passed away in 1943. He describes the machine as 2 great elliptical booms about 8 feet tall that were separated by 10 feet. In between there was a shimmering curtain of radiant energy. Radiant energy is a form of energy that Tesla discovered and used to bend the properties of time and space. By jumping through the field of radiant energy, participants would enter a tunnel, and when they felt the tunnel close, they would be at their destination. He said it felt as if they were moving very quickly or not at all. With so much to say about time travel, Bayago must have had some proof to go along with it. However, he claims that he can be seen in a photograph of Abraham Lincoln in 1863 and speaks to his experience being there. When asked about returning back to present day, he says that if he were a hologram for 15 minutes or less, the hologram would collapse, and he'd find himself back in the present about a minute later. Does this mean that he truly time traveled? Or was it all a figment of his imagination? With apparently about 100 people working on this secret project, no one else has yet to step forward and confirm what Bayago is saying to be true. It appears as if we may never know the truth, but maybe one day that will change. Pedro Oliva Ramirez, the man who traveled to a parallel universe. Our last mysterious individual is Pedro Oliva Ramirez from Seville, Spain. He was driving home one night when he experienced something unlike anything he'd experienced before. The start of his drive was normal, but it was once he laid eyes on the open land that was about 100 meters away where he could see 5 or 6 industries. When he looked over to the other side, he saw the same phenomenon, only there were residential buildings. He felt as if the landscape was a little unusual and then started to feel a strong sensation of heat invading his vehicle. He also described seeing a great soccer goal many meters ahead from the car and he had to pass through. He heard voices, one of which confirmed that he had been transferred to another country in a different hemisphere. He continued driving along the road for about an hour until he decided to stop. He got out of his car and walked along the edge of the road for many hours, looking at the lights of other vehicles and the grass. He got back in his car and continued driving until he found a triple sign with directions. He took a detour towards Seville and got lost. He tried to retrace his steps but never found the sign again and could not relocate the large 6-lane highway. he had previously been traveling on. When looking back on the maps, he wasn't able to find such a highway to begin with. After further investigation, Ramirez concluded that he must have passed over into another dimension while driving home that day. Of course, no one is able to confirm his experience to be true, so we'll have to go off his word for now. Maybe one day in the future we will be better equipped to understand what happened and have had this unusual experience. After taking a look at the lives of these three interesting and mysterious individuals, do you believe that time travel is real? With no real evidence to back each story, it's challenging to believe it entirely. With more people coming forward with stories related to teleportation and time travel, maybe we'll experience it for ourselves at some point. Until then, we can only choose to believe it's a real possibility if we want to. But what do you make of these mysterious individuals? As we have covered in the past, there has been a growing sentiment amongst archaeologists across North America that the Smithsonian Institute has been at the center of a large number of cover-ups when it comes to the impossible-to-explain artifacts found across Native American burial grounds and the true history of Native American tribes and their origins into the Americas. Additionally, overwhelming evidence for such cover-ups can be found in the hundreds of news reports made by reputable news sources over the last 22 decades, with archaeological reports dating as far back as the early 1800s. So today, we will be going over 5 more of these reported archaeological findings of giant humanoid skeletons found across the entirety of North America that the Smithsonian has been trying to cover up since its establishment. Potomac River Giant, the Morning Herald, May 14, 1956. Considered to be the most recent evidence of an unearthed giant humanoid skeleton, the Potomac River Giant article reported by the Morning Herald newspaper features the story of a recovered humanoid skeleton approximately 7 to 8 feet in height and believed to have been born over 2,000 years ago, located near the Potomac River. The article, published on the 14th of May back in 1956, covers in detail the discovery of the giant skeleton, the excavations that took place, the location of the discoveries for future archaeologists and researchers to revisit the sites for possible returning expeditions. Interestingly enough, the article itself explains that many of the researchers working on the discovery believed the large humanoid skeleton to have been an Algonquian Indian, a Native American tribe that even to this day have average heights several inches taller than the average world population. The article is quoted in its entirety saying, "The skeleton of a giant Indian, maybe 7 or more feet in height, who died and was buried about the time Christ was born, has been unearthed from prehistoric burial grounds along the Potomac River near Point of Rocks recently." Nicholas Yinger, who has been excavating at this and other sites of early Indian villages, discovered the skeleton of the giant Indian along with other artifacts buried with the body on Saturday, April 28th, just a few weeks ago. Mr. Yinger said that apart from the huge size of the Algonquian Indian, the next most interesting thing about the remains is that the bow and quiver of 5 arrows were buried with the body. 2 elk antlers and 3 1/2-inch arrow points in the center of the tibias are part of the quiver of arrows. Near the point of the antler arrows is a perfect boiled bone fishhook, revealing his fishing line was also placed with the body. 3 large white flint triangular arrowheads were found at the side of the left tibia. This aborigine must have been a hunter with great strength, as is indicated by the broad shank flint points used in a powerful bow, explained Yinger. Today, there is no known humanoid Algonquian Indian skeleton measuring 7 to 8 feet in height, and there is no evidence of specially made bows and arrows that would point to the possibility of a person capable of inhuman levels of strength. Any further information surrounding the article leads to dead ends, and next to no one can follow up on the skeletal discoveries made by Mr. Nicholas Yink. Ancient burial ground at Black Creek, Charlevoix, Mail, May 7, 1953. As is common in nearly all of the articles that feature the discovery of impossible-to-explain giant humanoid skeletons, the 8-foot-tall Black Creek Charlevoix male skeleton was discovered at the center of an ancient burial ground located along the Susquehanna River of Indiana County in Pennsylvania, that were of extraordinary height and were reassembled at the Harrisburg Museum. Unfortunately, Harrisburg Museum reported that despite shipping all of the skeletons to the Smithsonian for further study, the Smithsonian claimed they never received the skeletons and had no knowledge as to the validity of their existence. The article is quoted as directly saying, "Along the Susquehanna River in Indiana County, Pennsylvania, a major Indian burial site was uncovered. Altogether, 49 skeletons were exhumed, the tallest being 8 feet tall. These skeletons were reportedly taken to the Harrisburg Museum for reassembly and then shipped to the Smithsonian for further study. However, the Smithsonian denies any knowledge of them. On the site of the William H. Ray Farm, circa 1871 to 1880, in Conemaugh Township just west of the mouth of Blacklegs Creek, skeletons of men, probably Indians, were found. Noted local historian Clarence Stevenson says, one of the skeletons is of a giant, nearly 8 feet tall. The giant skeleton measured 89 inches from the top of the skull to the phalanges of the feet. It was covered with small stones laid on the back and measured 26 inches across the chest. The Black Creek discovery is one of the many articles that conspiracy theorists point to as evidence of an active cover-up made by the Smithsonian, going so far as to discredit the popular Harrisburg Museum to continue pushing a misinformation agenda on the true history of North America. Author Richard Dewhurst describes in his archaeological novel surrounding the possibility of giant humanoids that the Smithsonian has adopted direct policies to cover up any findings that contradict their original doctrine. Richard Dewhurst writes the following quote, "After the Civil War, the Smithsonian began to adopt a policy of excluding any evidence of direct foreign influence in the Americas prior to Columbus. Some have argued that it was an attempt by the fractured post-Civil War government to downplay any regional and ethnic conflicts in the still fragile national rebuilding after the war. Others have pointed to the expansionist policies incorporated in the doctrine of manifest destiny and the desire to obscure the origins of the tribes being displaced and annihilated by westward expansion. Still others have alleged that it was a direct religious policy adapted to counter the growing problem with the Mormon religion and its assertions that the lost tribes of Israel were to be found in America. Could Harrisburg's findings be direct evidence of this cover-up? Report of 68 skeletons averaging 7 feet tall, Charleston Daily Mail, September 20, 1916. Many critics surrounding the claims of recovered giant humanoid skeletons have often remarked that many of the researchers and excavators surrounding these peculiar skeletal discoveries are often amateur or paid-day laborers who do not have an extensive education on skeletons, believing that many of these large humanoid that were reassembled incorrectly. Interestingly enough, a fairly recent discovery made by the professor of American Indian Museum near Sarah, Pennsylvania dispels this critique, as the professor himself remarked at the strange size of skeletons that were recovered at the Tioga Point Mound back on the 13th of July of 1916. The finding was reported by the Charleston Daily Mail of Sarah, Pennsylvania, and included a short detail of the uncovering of 68 full skeletons that averaged 7 to 8 feet in height and were believed to have been buried together in a large Indian burial mound, estimated to have been between 700 and 800 years old. The article is quoted as saying, on July 13th, Professor Skinner of the American Indian Museum excavating the mound at Tioga Point near Sarah, Pennsylvania, uncovered the bones of 68 men, which he estimates had been buried at least 700 or 800 years ago. The average height indicated by the skeletons was 7 feet, but many were taller. Evidence of the gigantic size of these men was seen in huge axes found beside the bones. The giant 8 feet 7 inches tall unearthed, Ohio Science Annual 1898. Another often cited critique against the recorded articles of giant humanoid skeletal discoveries is that many of the newspapers or articles recovered were made only by local agencies and businesses that may or may not have been a reputable source of information. This critique, however, is completely invalid after examining the written articles of the published back in 1898 that also corroborated stories of giant unearthed humanoid skeletons that seemed to deny research at the time. According to one specific article, an archaeological discovery made near Raynersville in Morgan County, Ohio uncovered an unmarked mound burial site that contained the single skeleton of a giant measured to have been 8 feet and 7 inches in height. The Ohio Science Annual article is quoted as saying, "A rare archaeological discovery has been made near Raynersville in Morgan County, Ohio. A small knoll, which had always been supposed to be the result of an uprooted tree, was opened recently and discovered to be the work of mound builders. Just below the surrounding surface, a layer of boulders and pebbles was found. Directly underneath this was found the skeleton of a giant 8 feet 7 inches in height. Surrounding the skeleton were bone and stone implements, stone hatchets, and other characteristics of the mound builders. The discovery is considered by the scientists as one of the most important ever made in Ohio. The skeleton is now in the possession of a Raynersville collector. Although the skeleton was believed to be in the possession of a private collector located out of Raynersville, No known skeletal discovery has been made public in the region, with no evidence of the skeleton to be found. The Big Whopper, 18 feet and counting. Although many believers in the ancient giants of North America deny the account specified here, it is still an interesting story to take note of. According to a newspaper article published in the 1870 edition of the Ohio Democrat newspaper, there was an account of a discovered 18-foot-tall humanoid skeleton that was found buried with a 9-foot-long sword that took up the length from the feet to the waist of the giants. The article then claims that the skeleton was sent to New York for study. And what do you think of these impossible-to-explain giant humanoid skeletons discovered all across North America and inside ancient Indian burial mounds? This woman was taking a hike through Phillips Park in Manchester, England. However, she wasn't expecting to see this mysterious creature in a nearby tree. The woman said her friend managed to quickly snap a photograph of the animal and post photographs to social media, asking friends and followers what they thought it might be. One person suggested that it might be a monkey, but as others quickly pointed out, there's no monkey population in Manchester. Others who live close to the region said they've never seen anything that looks like that, and that there's limited wildlife in this area, so there's not much it could be. One person said they were going to take a walk down to the park to see if they could find it, but said that when they arrived there was no sign of it. Others said that one thing they're sure of is that whatever this thing is, it's not a human. The anatomy isn't the same as a human, and the torso is really small. Locals in the region have said there's a nearby graveyard and that they've heard people say this region is haunted. Others carried on from this and said that it looks like a spirit. The photographs got shared to a paranormal group, and some said it looks similar to the Chao, a paranormal entity that's commonly reported in India. It's prominent in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, and is a demonic evil force that takes the form of a woman. It's called a churl. It's described as the ghost of an impurified living thing, and it's also known as the tree spirit, as it tends to latch on the trees in the jungles of Asia. She allegedly takes the form of a beautiful woman, luring men she wants revenge on into the woods only to take their life or to take their vitality. Churls are thoughts come from women who have experienced an unnatural loss in life. The true form of the Cairo is a woman with a disfigured appearance. Depending on the country from which the legend originates, Cairos have black tongues, no mouth at all, a face that resembles a pig, claw-like hands and fangs. This is far from the stunning appearance of a young woman dressed all in whites that the Cairo allegedly shapeshifts into. According to Asian folklore, one can prevent the creation of a Cairo by either preventing its creation by treating a woman well during pregnancy or by performing a series of rituals upon the body once they've passed away. Some have said that because of the nearby graveyard, what people have seen could be an apparition, saying that these strange-looking creatures have been captured before, and it's usually always near a place that's said to be haunted. One person said the following: "I saw this photograph on a paranormal group. Although I don't live near this area, I have seen something similar here in India. I live close to Dew Hill in India, and I'm sure that the surrounding forests are haunted. It's not uncommon to see fast-moving apparitions and screams during the night. I've only visited the forest at night on a handful of occasions, and every time I normally see something that I would say was connected to the paranormal. On one occasion, I visited the forest with one of my friends. As he said, he wanted to go ghost hunting. After around 19 minutes, we started to see strange shapes zipping through the trees, something that I'd seen before. I can only describe these shapes as looking like black masses, and that it's really hard for your eyes to focus on them. We continued deeper into the forest, and this was when we saw a strange humanoid in one of the trees. This thing looks like a human, but as we approached, we could tell this was something completely different. Whatever it was had red eyes and was dressed in old clothing. The photograph that was shared to the group reminded me of this encounter, as the two look similar. Since going into the forest with my friend and encountering what we'd end, I've never been back during the night. As I said, I am certain that something terrible happened in the forest, and that whatever this was caused it to be the way it is. Dark things live in that forest, and I don't plan on going back anytime soon." End quote. The Dew Hill Forest is plagued by a number of strange supernatural sightings and disappearances. Many locals and tourists have reported seeing children running through the forest at night, appearing to be deformed or startling in their appearance. However, these claims have only become more and more popular, as many skeptics flock to the sites with the hopes of dismissing these claims, only to capture a tremendous amount of images and footage of school children running through the forest at night. Oddly enough, the Victoria Boys' School, located in that region and established in the 1800s, is rumored to be a hotspot of paranormal activity from the forest. There are no faculty members that will work late at the school throughout the night. Janitors and other employees that are forced to work through the night tend to have a high rate of turnover and end up quitting their jobs. Some of these individuals have reported that during their shifts they will see shadows flickering across the walls, and that when they go in for a closer look they vanish before their eyes. Other workers reported that while cleaning the floors they could hear noises coming from another part of the building. A janitor, knowing he was alone, decided to investigate, thinking that perhaps some students had sneaked into the building. As the man approached the noises, he could tell they were those of children and described them as high-pitched laughs. He said that at the time he felt uneasy as there shouldn't have been any children in the building. As the noises got louder, he knew he was on the right path, and then suddenly he heard the distinctive sound of a ball bouncing on the ground. This sound was coming from behind him. As he turned around, he couldn't see anything as the halls were covered in dark shadows. After staring into the darkness for what seemed like several minutes, a ball slowly started to roll out from the shadows until it eventually stopped at his feet. The worker described that he had been frozen in place during this experience and that he'd never experienced anything like this before. So what do you make of this strange photograph captured in Manchester, England? This mysterious rock has scientists stumped. The Chang'e 4 lander and the Yutu River have started exploring the lunar terrain once again. This was after the robotics went into a state of hibernation, and this was due to cold lunar nights. This most recent discovery comes in the form of a mysterious-looking rock, which researchers have said is an exciting discovery. This strange rock was soon referred to as a milestone, with the China National Space Administration and mission scientists agreeing that further inspection of the rock was needed. According to the team, they have said they aim to go in for a closer look, and that they will analyze the rock using the visible and near-infrared imaging spectrometer instrument. This instrument has been used in the past to investigate other strange-looking rocks. Dan Moradi, NASA's postdoctoral program fellow at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, said the following to Space.com. Repeated impact stresses from thermal cycling and other forms of weathering on the lunar surface would all tend to break down rocks into more or less spherical shapes, given enough time. I would definitely guess an origin as impact ejecta from some nearby crater. In recent years, there's been a lot of special interest in the dark side of the moon. This popular term refers to the fact that the same physical half of the moon is always facing Earth, which in turn means there's a dark side. One of the most recent announcements to come from the mission was that another Chinese rover had discovered a strange gel-like substance. At the time, it wasn't known what the gel was, causing various people to put forward their theories for what they thought it could be. However, it's now been announced by scientists that they figured out what the substance was. It turns out that the gel comes from the many rocks that can be found on the surface. Scientists went on to say this gel-like substance was likely created when rocks melted together. This could have happened when a meteorite struck the surface of the moon, causing a massive amount of heat to melt the surrounding rocks. The strange gel was discovered back in July of 2019. Chinese officials stated this find was strange, as you don't normally find something like this on the moon. Photographs soon started to make the rounds, which showed a part of the moon that looked glossy. Scientists then said that after more detailed photographs were sent back, it backed up their theory that this substance was created by intense heat. This research was published in the Earth and Planetary Science Letters. China has been making some great strides when it comes to space. On January 3, 2019, at around 10:26 a.m. Beijing time, China's robot spacecraft successfully landed on the far side of the moon. The spacecraft Chang'e 4 puts China in the running for a space leader, as it's the first in history to land in the South Pole at Compilation, which is an area of the moon that is never visible to Earth. This dark side of the moon is unexplored territory. No one has attempted to reach it before. The moon is the Earth's only natural satellite, rotating every 27 days or so. We actually are only able to see approximately 60% of the moon's surface. The 40% of the dark side of the moon is always hidden away from us. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has spent the past 50 years collecting images of the far side of the moon, and this is through satellites and other space probes. So, although we have known for some time what the other side roughly looks like, this landing makes history and will reveal even more detailed information about the moon and space that we did not know prior. There is no direct communication link to the robotic spacecraft. So in order for the lunar images it captured to reach Earth, it has to be rerouted through another satellite that China recently launched prior to this mission. Tianhe-4 was launched on December 7, 2018, and arrived in the moon's orbit 5 days later. It then took the rest of the month to lure itself onto the surface. Named after a Chinese goddess who supposedly lived for millennia on the moon, its mission is to explore the massive South Pole Aitken Basin. This basin is one of the largest known impact craters in our whole solar system. The distance from its tallest peak to its very depths is nearly 15 kilometers, or 9.3 miles. To put that into perspective, Mount Everest measures around 9.8 kilometers or 5.5 miles. Tianhe-4 will collect soil samples to analyze the structure and composition of the moon above and below its surface. What's even more amazing is that the Tianhe-4 brought live plant species from Earth that it will use to plant a garden. It carries cotton, rapeseed, potato, yeast, and the small flowering plant Arabidopsis. Apart from gathering samples and data, its other mission is to attempt to grow the first plants on the moon. The China National Space Administration also explained that since there is no radio interference on the dark side, there is opportunity for the spacecraft to observe the stars and nebula using radio astronomy. Even though the moon has been explored since the 1960s, there is still so much information still unknown to us. China first announced its moon landing plan back in 2016. Their space program has grown incredibly quick since their first astronaut launching in 2003, and over time they managed to send multiple robotic spacecrafts onto the moon. They've also launched various satellites and space stations, and even a Mars rover. It's amazing to think how far we've come technologically. China has also revealed their plans to create a nuclear fusion reactor that will reach extreme temperatures similar to those found at the sun's core. They claim that their artificial sun will be able to burn up to 360 million degrees Fahrenheit, around 12 times hotter than our sun. Nuclear fusion on the sun occurs when two hydrogen nuclei fuse together to form a heavier helium nucleus, thus releasing an intense amount of energy during the process. Their device is called the Experimental Advanced Superconducting Tokamak. A tokamak is a ring-shaped device in which the hydrogen is heated to extreme temperatures and turns into plasma. What do you make of these recent projects and discoveries? Nikola Tesla was easily one of the greatest minds that ever lived, and it's said that had people been more open to his theories and ideas, our world would be a completely different place. At the time, his unique mind wasn't appreciated. It's only been in the years following his death that people respected what he was trying to achieve. Nikola Tesla wasn't one to shy away from electricity and being able to harness it. He also looked at things like anti-gravity technology and something that became known as the ether. One of his famous quotes was the following: "I've worked out a dynamic theory on gravity in all details, and hope to give this to the world very soon." As mentioned, as with many of the great minds of the past, there's a lot of people today that don't understand the impacts they had on modern life. For example, electricity, radar, microwaves, the radio, drones, and many other things all came from the great minds that was Nikola Tesla. He is the definition of a man that was born in the wrong era. To show how ahead he was, when he was demonstrating a remote-controlled boat as an exhibition at Madison Square Garden, everyone couldn't believe what they were seeing and branded Tesla as some sort of magician, demanding that the boat be torn open and prove that he hadn't shrunk people inside. It must have been frustrating for Tesla to have been trying to put forward his ideas in a time like this where, instead of being appreciated, people just wrote off your work as being fantasy and magic. Tesla began believing in an old alchemical mysticism known as the ether. He would talk about it for length and believe that he could tap into it and use its abilities to create a future in which magical devices could exist and change the landscape and powers of humanity overall. This led to a popular quotes that many people reference today, in which Nikola Tesla states the following: "When wireless is perfectly applied, the whole earth will be converted into a huge brain," which in fact is all things being particles of a real and rhythmic whole. We shall be able to communicate with each other instantly, irrespective of distance. Not only this, but we shall see and hear one another as perfectly as though we're face to face, despite intervening distances of thousands of miles, and the instruments through which we shall be able to do this will fit inside of Vespicans. Nikola Tesla is also known for a sad letter he sent to his mother. In the letter he says the following: "My dear mother, I feel sad and dreary when I think of you. I don't know how, but I feel that you are not well. I wish I could be beside you now, mother, to bring you a glass of water. All these years that I've spent in the service of mankind brought me nothing but insults and humiliations. This morning I woke up early just before dawn, because I'd heard something that I'd been hearing through my dreams for quite some time now. I heard this voice that sang some beautiful chant, lament, or even prayer in Moorish. When I came to my senses, I realized that this voice came from everywhere, and it was impossible to determine whether it was coming from within. I'm afraid of losing my mind. I cannot confide this to Dr. Lionel because I don't trust him anymore. I heard that he visited Mr. Edison 2 weeks ago. Again, my thoughts are of you, mother, and again I feel the same restlessness and sorrow. I will write to the patent office to speed up the realization of my public experiment for 1 week. I have to go back home to my homeland, to you. I know now for sure that you're not well because once again I've heard that lamenting voice, but this time I was wide awake. I still haven't lost my sense. I didn't write to the patent office. Once their agents came and I told him about my intentions in person, he said he was sorry, but the dates could not be changed because all the congressmen have already determined them. I went down to the waterfalls and told the boys to prepare the turbines and wait for my call tomorrow. I've decided to provide the mankind with the gift it deserves and return to Europe to you, my mother. Governments here are the same as the ones back home. I have realized now that at the end, the mankind depends on governments and the individual cannot change the world on himself. But that strange voice still bothers me. I know it's connected to you. My experiment was something transcendental. Dear mother, I leave for Yugoslavia tomorrow. Miss Nora went to the port and brought me a ticket for Lisbon. From there, I will go by train to Zurich and then straight home. It will take me approximately 10 days. No more than 2 weeks to get home. Today, I have entered the congressional office building. And at the middle of their congressional session, I asked for a couple of minutes of their time. They weren't very happy about it, but they let me. I asked for the telephone to call the laboratory at Niagara Falls. The boys over there activated the turbines and the Congress Hall was lit up with my power, 10 times stronger than the regular one as I promised it weren't. I didn't care about their reactions at all. I instantly left the hall because I didn't do this for them but for mankind. In that very moment when I was looking at the lightning bulb to shun with my wireless electricity, I realized that I wasn't the maker of all of this. I felt that someone or something was carrying it from Niagara Falls to the Congress Hall, and that the law I thought I invented actually always existed. I was just the vessel blessed with inspiration to formulate and explain it to mankind. Instead of triumph and happiness, some empty sorrow emerged. I realized that I had been missing something big in my life, as if I'd left something unrecognized completely. Some formula was within the grasp of my understanding, and I have failed or didn't want to clarify it. That has to be connected to the Moish lament. I am sure of it now. This letter will never get to you, mother. I don't know why I write it to you when you cannot read it. Rest in peace, mother. And please forgive me for choosing paths that led me away from you. I cannot even be there for your funeral. I read the telegram that informed me of your death and despised people who weren't ready to understand 2 years ago that electricity can't be transformed without wires. Now they've seen it, but they won't use it for centuries to come because someone burned down my downtown laboratory to the ground with all my formulas and writings in it. They suspect of Mr. Edison. I became so indifferent I cannot even recognize myself. I would maybe feel sad before, but not anymore because I am now sure that someone is keeping my patterns under control, that my discovery isn't mine at all, and finally that mankind was not ready for it. I know that someone is overseeing everything and has a plan of their own, which is probably why I am so indifferent. I will lay this letter on your grave when I arrive at our village's graveyard. I believe in something that I never believed at. I believe that I'm still a part of you, and that my life is not over for good. I now feel sorry for avoiding Turks, because they sang laments I heard before dawns. I now realize that they knew more about this thing a lot more than I did. All those years spent in science were in vain. Please, Mother, forgive me. Forgive me for taking these paths. This is the last letter that Nikola Tesla sent to his mother, a sad reminder of what he was facing during this time. Tesla also said the following during an interview. I wanted to illuminate the whole Earth. There is enough electricity to become a second sun. Light would appear around the equator as a ring around Saturn. Mankind is not ready for the great and good. In Colorado Springs, I soaked the Earth by electricity. Also, we can water the other energies such as positive and mental energy. They are the music of great composers or the verses of great poets. In the Earth's interior, there are energy of joy, peace, and love. Their expressions are a flower that grows from the earth, the food we get out of her, and everything that makes man's homeland. I've spent years looking for the way that this energy could influence people. The beauty and the scent of roses can be used as a medicine, and the sun's rays as a food. Life has an infinite number of forms, and the duty of scientists is to find them in every form of matter. 3 things are essential in this. All that I do is search for them. I know I will not find them, but I will never give up on them. Developed as part of the European Space Agency and NASA's HelioViewer project, the Solar Helios Frequency Observatory allows INON to view its entire library. Over the years, it's provided some incredible photographs of our sun. However, some have noticed some strange anomalies. The most recent sighting to come from here is said to be a massive UFO seen exiting the sun. It seems that every other day one of these alleged UFOs is seen, with the person who saw it claiming it to be hundreds of miles in length. In this case, though, ET database suggested this giant craft was over 25 times the size of planet Earth. ET database suggested that the large flare that could be seen was caused by a giant UFO exiting the sun. They go on to say that it's one of the largest objects they've seen in recent times. Other UFO researchers have pointed out it's one of the best places to see a UFO. Interestingly, they say that different ship crafts can be seen leaving our sun, and that some of them even stick around for several hours before making a quick exit. Due to this, amateur researchers have spent countless hours watching these live feeds and looking through old videos. One individual said the following about the anomalies seen around the sun. I've been watching the SOHO cameras for years and I've seen some strange things. What stands out to me though is how big these crafts are. The majority of these crafts that I see on these cameras are massive. When you compare the size of these objects to the size of our planet, in some cases they're over 10 times the size. I can't work out what these things are, but whatever they are, they're massive and seem to take an interest in our sun. Others, however, have suggested that these crafts can't be real, and that no object could be that big and get that close to the sun. So what are these objects that people are seeing? NASA has provided an official explanation on their SOHO page. They said the following: ever since launch, there's been a number of people who've claimed to have seen flying saucers and other objects in SOHO images. Although some of the supposed pictures of UFOs can seem quite intriguing, they've always turned out to have a quite ordinary cause when examined by experienced SOHO scientists. In recent times, we've been receiving so many questions and claims that we'd like to set the record straight. We've never seen anything that even suggests that there's UFOs out there. In the past, we've been accused of covering up UFO evidence when we present our explanations, and of refusing to comment or clamming up when we give up on somebody who won't accept our explanations. While we don't expect to convince everybody, we hope that this page can provide some information for the curious who want to investigate the claims on their own. Most commonly, UFO claims are due to perfectly natural flaws or artifacts in our publicly available data. Some of the things that people are seeing are planets, cosmic rays, software glitches, and debris. Another NASA official said the following about these claims: the majority of these alleged UFO sightings can be explained. One of the things that people see is space debris that's made its way in front of the cameras. When these pieces of debris are up close, it can look like an unidentified flying object. In reality, people are just seeing a common piece of space debris. In recent years, it seems that more people than ever are talking about unidentified flying objects. Going back several years ago, it was a topic that wasn't talked about or featured in the mainstream media very much. However, in recent years, this has changed. People now more than ever are openly talking about this topic. A variety of different people have decided that now is the right time to come forward with their sighting. This includes professionals like pilots. A Navy pilot who recorded an unidentified flying object in 2004 went viral when he decided to tell his story. The object in question is said to resemble a tic-tac, and over the last few decades, many military personnel have come forward with their encounters. Mr. Underwood is the Navy pilot who came forward with his encounter and described the object as traveling very fast. The object immediately went viral across many sites, mainly because the military tend to stay away from these types of encounters, and even if they do happen, they don't tend to comment on them. This video, however, has been described by some theorists as being the best UFO footage to come out in recent years. Interestingly, though, the Navy pilot behind the incident isn't a fan of the newfound fame. In recent interviews, he stated he doesn't want to get involved with the UFO phenomena and said that he doesn't think it's alien in nature. He went on to say that the object in question is a UFO, an object that at that moment in time he couldn't identify. Although at first some deemed the footage to be vague, U.S. Navy officials came forward and confirmed the clips are genuine. Radar operator Kevin Day said that he picked up on the mysterious object. Not only that, but there was a group of them flying in a tight formation. This report, however, came several days before the Navy pilot encountered the object. This has caused some to suggest that the UFOs were seen in the area before they were encountered by the pilot. This isn't uncommon, and some individuals have seen some of the most famous UFO crashes days before they make the news. The radar operator said the crafts were slowly moving. This caused some to put forward that the objects could have been burnt. But the operator said the objects were flying too high to be birds, and interestingly they were flying too close to be any conventional aircrafts. The unidentified flying objects were flying at 28,000 feet and traveling at an approximate speed of 138 miles per hour. The objects also weren't on an established flight path, meaning they couldn't have been linked to any conventional aircraft. The operator tried to identify what they were, but couldn't come up with a logical answer. Mr. Underwood then had his encounter while he was on a flight training exercise. This happened in 2005, and he was able to remain silent about it for almost 15 years. He's had several interviews talking about the objects, and seems confused about what he encountered that day. In one interview, he said the following: "At no point did I want to speculate as to what I thought this thing was, or be associated with alien beings, alien aircrafts, and all that stuff. It's just what we call a UFO. I couldn't identify it. It was flying and it was an object. It's as simple as that." The one thing this encounter has done is sparked a new interest in UFOs and unidentifiable phenomena. People are more interested in UFOs now than ever before, and it could be in part because of the Navy UFO sighting. It's one of the clearest UFOs that's been captured on camera, and now the Navy has announced it's genuine. It's given these types of sightings more credibility. When a UFO is seen by someone or caught on camera, it's usually debunked straight away. However, with this footage, it shows us that even the Navy have encountered something they're not sure of. Unfortunately, the majority of UFOs and crafts that are caught on camera are not genuine. One paranormal researcher said the following about UFOs. UFOs make for great headlines and they interest many of us. However, what researchers can agree on is that 99% of them are not genuine. The majority of videos and photographs that are taken of UFOs do eventually get solved. The issue we're facing at the moment is that there's many hoaxes out there, and it's these people that make genuine researchers' life difficult. Instead of trying to find real evidence and push this research further, what I'm finding is that the majority of my time is spent debunking videos, and most of these don't include anything of an unexplainable nature. Every day, hundreds of videos of UFOs are taken, and if one sits down and applies logic, it becomes very easy to explain what's actually going on. Most of these are led UFOs to not be everyday things. This includes solar events, photograph anomalies, birds, military operations, balloons, conventional aircrafts, toys such as airplanes, and of course, hoaxes. As of today, the topic of UFOs is only gaining more interest. People around the world are opening up and coming forward with their encounters. Everyday mysterious objects are being filmed in our sky. Some researchers have even claimed that UFO sightings are on the increase, and that soon we could be receiving some incredible news in regards to this topic. In 2017, newly revealed documents revealed that a collector in Petersburg had among his collections 2 Apollo-era NASA computers, as well as hundreds of tapes. These tapes may have had a link to unknown information relating to the exploration of space, but we'll never know now since NASA ordered the tapes to be destroyed. It's believed that the collector who stored the computers and tapes in his garage died in 2011. It's said that a man contacted NASA back in 2015. This was after discovering NASA computers in a basement in garage he was cleaning out. Not only this, but there were also magnetic data tapes dated between 1967 and 1974. These were labeled as Pioneer Pro missions. NASA released the following information in a document back in 2015. Recovery of possible historic 1969 NASA data tapes. This administrative investigation was initiated upon receipt of information from Redacted. A NASA official who advised Redacted located in Petersburg contacted her regarding her computer with a plate labeled Goddard Space Flight Center, NASA property and reals of magnetic data tapes. Several were labeled 1969 that were found while an acquaintance was cleaning the residence of a deceased person. On December 1, 2015, the reporting agent interviewed Redacted regarding the NASA reels and computers. Redacted explained he scraps precious metals as a hobby and for additional income. Redacted stated he was approached by Redacted, the Redacted of Redacted, who was aware of Redacted's scrapping hobby. Stated Redacted recently passed away and had a lot of electronic equipment at his residence. According to Redacted, they explained that he could have anything he wanted from the residence. During the weekend of November 14, 2015, Redacted is cleaning Redacted's home and discovered approximately 300 reels of tapes from NASA, dating from 1969 to 1972, along with 2 large computers bearing NASA's markings. Redacted moved the reels of tapes to his residence, but left the computers at Redacted's house because they were very heavy, adding that a crane was likely used to move them. Redacted stated he wanted to do the right thing and return the NASA property. Redacted relayed he has a key to Redacted's residence and would accompany investigators to inspect the computers. This potential recovery of NASA historic items was coordinated with Redacted History Office, NASA headquarters, Redacted Advice who'd like to review the reel takes for historic significance, and requested assistance from the NASA Office of Inspector General in collecting them. Interestingly, this has all kept quiet. It was only because Motherboard got wind of what was happening and then issued a report using a Freedom of Act information request. After this, the documents were released to the public. As some have pointed out though, although the documents were released, a lot of the details have been redacted. One thing that was made clear though was that NASA did have all of the files destroyed. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has been responsible for numerous incredible achievements and has made countless discoveries. It's one of the most prestigious research agencies in the world and one of the first to conduct space explorations. Since the first launch into space, there have been many technological advances and discoveries. However, NASA officials have also been responsible for several errors and failures, which shows that regardless of the studies or experience they may have, it's still possible to make mistakes. It's no secret that only a few of those mistakes have been exposed to the public. One significant mistake made by NASA was losing the original footage of the first moonwalk. NASA officials claim to have searched for these missing tapes since their disappearance was confirmed. NASA have stated that the tapes were simply misplaced. But many people doubt this due to the vast number of tapes that must have been lost. The question is, how did they lose such valuable tapes? Before the tapes were lost, clips from the footage were broadcast on television. These first steps of man on the moon were an unparalleled achievement in space travel at the time, and therefore it seems unbelievable that these tapes could have been misplaced so easily. Some say they were hidden from the public for security reasons, others say that they were really lost, and there's also some more complex theories. One of the theories created by a community of people who don't trust the credibility of NASA states that these alleged missing files are hiding something, and so the space agency got rid of any evidence that was on them. However, in recent years, these missing tapes were found. It's believed that more than 2,000 tapes of recordings were considered not important by NASA and were demagnetized to be reused for other occasions and therefore ended up at an auction. And NASA in turn purchased approximately 65 boxes of these tapes in an auction. Not knowing that the tapes had such important footage on them, the intern planned to sell the tapes on a television station where they would have been recycled and reused for new recordings. However, the intern then noticed a label on the outside of the boxes identifying them as the Apollo 11 mission. The intern had heard the story of the lost tapes, and therefore found a way to play the tapes in order to identify them. Once they were confirmed as the missing tapes, approximately 2.5 hours of footage was recovered and digitized. Another topic this interested people is that of UFOs, and even astronauts themselves have come forward with their own stories. One of these individuals is that of Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell was the 6th person to walk on the moon's surface. He piloted the Apollo 14 lunar module, the first Apollo mission attempting to carry out scientific experiments on the moon. The crew spent 9 hours working in its Fremont or Highland region. Despite being one of the lucky few to have experienced the wonders of spaceflight, Mitchell may be no more among the space community due to his outspoken theories on UFOs and alien life. Mitchell grew up in America amid the space race, a mere teenager when the suspected Roswell UFO crash occurred in 1947. Mitchell himself did not live far from the site of the infamous crash. He pursued a military career, joining the U.S. Navy as a pilot in 1948, and was selected by NASA in 1966 to become an astronaut. However, it was towards the end of Mitchell's career, and after his retirement, that he became the focus of discussion about the potentially paranormal events that occur in space, and those that he himself had experienced. It was during the Apollo 14 mission, unbeknownst to the world, that things began to get a little weird with Edgar Mitchell. After experiencing what he described as a spirit above creation, Mitchell became ever more interested in paranormal phenomena and consciousness. He began to conduct ESP experiments, experimenting with psychic abilities such as telepathy, and he did this on board the Apollo 14 module. Chillingly, Mitchell's experience did seem to have an effect on him. He and a group of psychics later alleged they shared mental communications whilst he was in orbit. He later founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which continued the experiments he had been conducting in private in his space. During his lifetime, Mitchell consistently testified to the existence of UFOs. In 1996, in an interview with American TV program Dateline, Mitchell stated that UFO contact is very strong, and that the U.S. government was covering up alien visits when UFO crashes. The subject of UFOs in space isn't slowing down either. In fact, there's many that believe that these unidentified flying objects can be seen when looking at the International Space Station. The International Space Station is a large spacecraft that can be found in orbit around our planet. Over the years, astronauts have called this place home. It also serves as a science laboratory where various experiments have been carried out. The station was the work of various countries. Many nations have sent their astronauts to stay on board, and incredibly many parts of it were assembled in space by the astronauts themselves. It's not as deep in space as some people think, though. It orbits our planet at an altitude of approximately 250 miles. Due to traveling at over 17,500 miles per hour, it orbits Earth every 90 minutes or so. In recent years, it's become important for space agencies to establish space stations in space. This helps with continued research projects and plans. There's various international space station cameras that give the public a chance to look out into the cosmos. However, every so often, someone manages to record something that can't be explained. Here's some videos that have been captured by the International Space Station, allegedly showing crafts that are reported by some as being otherworldly. All across North America are reports of a creature that's been given the name of the Dogman. Those who have reported the creature have described it as looking like a strange werewolf-like creature and seems to possess supernatural strength and abilities. Those who have come forward with their encounters have often compared the creature to a more dog-like Sasquatch, whereas others believe it to be more of a werewolf beast, and at the center of skinwalker legends. Interestingly, for the last 60 years there have been many reports about these creatures, and as with most of these tales, the majority of these stories follow a similar theme. Researchers have managed to pinpoint the first Dogman sighting to 1887. This was said to have occurred in Wexford County. The story goes that two lumberjacks were having a conversation when one of them spotted something mysterious. He described it as having a man's body and a dog's head. When they noticed it, they quickly left the scene, not wanting to stay and risk getting hurt by the large creature. Fast forward to 1961, and a security guard witnessed something similar in Big Rapids, Michigan. Most of the encounters with these creatures are just stories, and there's no way to back up what the individual saw. However, the security guard remembered that he had a camera on him and was in fact able to snap a photograph of the large beast. Those who have analyzed it say it matches other eyewitness descriptions of the dogman. One of the issues with these types of stories is the lack of evidence to back them up. But now another photograph is making its way online, allegedly showing the dogman cryptid. It's hard to track down its origin, but the image was first seen on various groups on Facebook. The story goes that one night someone was looking through their trail camera that was pointed towards their garden. After a while, they could see something moving in the bushes towards the left side of the screen. Brushing it off as everyday wildlife, they didn't bother to look closer, as seeing nature in their back garden wasn't uncommon. However, after a few minutes, the individual noticed that whatever this thing was taking up a lot of room. The animal soon left the scene, leaving the person confused with what they'd just seen. They then decided to download the video and brighten it on their computer. It was only after doing this that they discovered a large dog-like creature had been there the whole time, looking towards the house where the person had been watching the camera. Those who have seen the image have said it's one of the best pieces of evidence of the dogman creature. As of today, there's been various people who have come forward with their encounters with this mysterious beast. One person said the following about their encounter. I'm going to tell you a story of mine that I rarely tell. My own family don't even know about this. And while that may sound strange to you, trust me, it makes sense to tell internet strangers than people I'm forced to be around. This story has been told on YouTube before, but I want to clear up some confusion around it. This happened when I was much younger. I'd have to ask my parents when the camping trip happened to tell you how many years ago it was, but I can assure you it was at least a decade. Now I'm going to use some questionable words to describe the location. Words like wooded and wilderness reserve, because I don't know the best words for this thing. Around a decade ago, a friend from church asked me to join his family on a camping trip to a wilderness reserve called Oasis State Park. Of course, since this was my best friend and his family had always been nice, I said yes. Up until that point, I'd only camped rarely, so the prospect of camping with a friend and his family seemed absolutely amazing. So we began preparing for a weekend when I wasn't busy. I got my own tent, my own sleeping bag, and my own supplies. Once all that was gathered, the father of the friend came and picked me up, and my parents waved me off. There's quite a few things I remember from that trip. The amazingly hostile yet beautiful New Mexico countryside, the high ground and the campsite. The New Mexican wilderness isn't something a lot of people fantasize about camping in, at least not as far as I know. But Oasis State Park is different. The camping plots are all nice even if the best ones are taken. There's a pretty lake, lots of wildlife, and I have to admit, more trees than I've ever seen in my town. I know nobody thinks of multitudes of trees when they think of New Mexico, and for good reason. They aren't the most common occurrence in the plains and less planted by people. Regardless, Oasis has enough for me to use the term woods. We found ourselves a plot and began setting up our tents. By the afternoon, the tents were set and me and my friend ditched this boring younger sister in favor of exploring the park. The memories are fantastic. We found a snake by the lake and watched it drink from the water before slithering off quickly. We explored a place I remember was very sandy. We watched a roadrunner doing its thing. We played all day after lunch and saw so many amazing things by the end of the day. I never would have thought anything could go wrong. We finished the day like you always do, by collecting sticks and starting a fire to eat s'mores and tell ghost stories. None of the stories were scary, probably because me and my friend were kids and his sister was even younger. Shortly after the stories were said and s'mores were eaten, we retired. Me to my tent and my friend, his father and his sister to their tent. After this setup, I'll explain the positioning. This is all going to be important. My tent was at one edge of the plot and my friend's tent was at the exact opposite. This was for privacy reasons. Now at my end of the plot was a mini trail that led through thick brush to the lake. Also around 3 feet from my tent was a little tree. I don't know what kind of tree it was, but it was still young and small. The trail to the lake was to the left of my tent. The lake was behind it, and a thin tree line sat across a trail in front of my tent. That trail in front of my tent led to the bathrooms. So I went to bed without a single bit of fear. And before I did, I went ahead and urinated on the tree outside of my tent because of laziness. I didn't want to do a 2-minute walk to the bathrooms when nature's toilet was outside my tent. So I finished closing my tent for the night and climbed into my sleeping bag. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up to use the bathroom. Before I did this, though, I decided to grab my little lantern. I flipped on my LED lantern and unzipped the inner flap of my tent, as if that little null on net could protect me from what I was about to see. Now I should mention that outside of cities in New Mexico, it's quite common to hear coyotes howl. It's a nutty occurrence in camping. Even up in little villages like Logan, you can hear howls from your bedroom. It isn't so unnerving when you're in a house. But when you've got some flimsy null and walls to protect you and that's it, it isn't the most comforting sound. As I unzipped my tent flap, I could hear a few howls, but they were distant to not worrying. What stunned me into stillness was a loud howl from the direction of the lake, about a yard from my tent. This howl was different though. It had the feel of a Kotwai howl, but it was deeper and lasted longer. I simply sat there petrified at what I'd heard. I wouldn't be able to guess at how long I sat there breathing hard with my fingers still grasping the zipper, but however long it may have been, it was just long enough for the thing that made the howl to come up to my tent. Suddenly, I heard the crunching of claws on dirt, and after that claws on the rocks that made our camping plots. Then I saw the largest shadow made by a living creature I'd ever seen. It lumbered heavily in the direction of the sparse tree line, where I assumed the other howling had come from. Before it got past the tree I urinated on, it stomped. I realized only then that I was both lit like a candle and had not been trying to silence my heavy breathing. By then it was too late as the hulking thing lumbered over close to the tree and into the light of my lantern. As dim as the LED light was at that distance, it was just barely enough to make out details. I'd like to note a few very important details that stuck out to me as odd. It had roughly the fur coloring of a coyote, but that classic dogman head shape with tiny pointed ears too small to make sense. It also made strange noises as it lowered on all fours in front of my tent. Popping sounds like joints rubbing together, as I can only imagine its knees busted out of their standing joints and fell into different joints to support it on all fours. It briefly ignored me. The breaths were similar to a dog's but longer and far deeper, almost like a horse's. Then that thing turned to me and stared me straight into my eyes. Its eyes didn't glow. They didn't peer into my soul, but they were unbelievably unnatural. Above all things I saw in those eyes, I saw a predator. Have you ever been in a position where you made eye contact with a beast you know is stronger than you? Something you know could just slaughter you and you know it knows you know. Just looking for so long that I thought for sure I'd just be a bloody stain by the time anyone reached my tent. Screaming would do nothing. But despite every feeling in my gut, despite the dread of knowing it was a predator and I was prey, I didn't die. Instead it turned slowly, ever so slowly, and just sprinted off into the woods. It just went into the night faster than it came. I have one personal friend who knows about what happened and jokes that it was my wee that caused it to stall and then run away. Or maybe it just wasn't hungry. Almost improbable it just had enough morals not to kill a kid. I'll never really know. Needless to say, I didn't go to the bathroom. I just put my lantern away, closed up my tent flap, and held it in all night. I don't remember sleeping that night. I might have, I might not. But if I did, it was dreamless. I do remember that I tried to hide the expression the next day, asking if my friend and his family heard any howling. While they did hear howling, they told me just to ignore it, thinking it was a coyote. I was encouraged to ignore it, as if I was a city kid who'd never heard a coyote howling before. The next day, I stayed as close to my friends as possible while exploring, and had nearly forgotten about the encounter by lunch. Somehow the safety I had been feeling during the day put the beast out of my mind, until we found tracks in a sandy place. I think those tracks confirmed to me that it wasn't just a dream, and because of that I showed enough fear that night to convince my friend's family to let me sleep in their tent. Even in the comfort of a warmer tent and in the presence of a few adults, I couldn't sleep that night. I'd nearly drift into a sleep and then I'd hear a Cody howl. The next day I pretended to be sick and got my mother to drive up and take me home a day or two early. It was the worst camping trip of my life. It ruined not only my whole summer, but it also ruined camping. I haven't been camping without a tent buddy since, and I don't plan to. Even then, I'm never comfortable. I'm always listening for strange noises and acting paranoid. This really messed me up. Being forced to see that a human which is at the top of the food chain is utterly powerless in front of such a beast. I don't think I can press hard enough to make everyone realize how powerless I felt. Even today, when I think about this, I remember two things. Those eyes and that feeling. Just writing this sent multiple shivers up my spine. The Large Hadron Collider was built by the European Organization for Nuclear Research, also known as CERN. It's the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. It first started up on the 10th of September 2008 and remains the latest addition to CERN's accelerator complex. The Large Hadron Collider consists of a 27-kilometer ring of superconducting magnets, with a number of accelerating structures to boost the energy of the particles along the way. CERN, the European Physics Research Center, recently upgraded the Large Hadron Collider. The upgrade comes 6 years after the collider managed to provide scientists with answers to a riddle, when it confirmed that the Higgs boson exists. Scientists claim the upgrade would help in boosting new monocity of proton smashing experiments. At the Large Hadron Collider 17 miles underneath the border of Switzerland and France. It should help to boost the amount of particle collision tenfold, which would give them a much clearer picture of the subatomic well. It's just been announced that a new supercollider has been approved by CERN, and what's interesting is that it makes the current one look tiny. This new collider will have a circumference of over 62 miles, meaning it will be 4 times bigger and much more powerful than the current one. However, this isn't going to be cheap, with researchers estimating it's going to cost around $23 billion. CERN said the following about the news. Such a massive machine would produce copious amounts of Higgs boson in a very clean environment. It would make dramatic progress in mapping the diverse interactions of the Higgs boson with other particles, and allow measurements of extremely high precision. They continued with the following on their website. The Future Circular Collider Study is developing designs for a high-performance particle collider to extend the research currently being conducted at the Large Hadron Collider. Once the latter reaches the end of its lifespan, the goal of the FCC is to greatly push the energy and intensity frontiers of particle colliders, with the aim of reaching collision energies of 1/110th or tera-electron volts in the search of new physics. The FCC study, hosted by SAN, is an international collaboration of more than 150 universities, research institutes, and industrial partners from all over the world. The study will elaborate on different possibilities for circular colliders, new detector facilities, the associated infrastructure cost estimates, global implementation scenarios, as well as appropriate international governance structures. The FCC examines scenarios of 3 different types of particle collisions: hadron-proton-proton and heavy ion collisions, like in the Large Hadron Collider; electron-positron collisions, as in the former LEP, and proton-electron collisions. One question that people have asked is, where is this money coming from? Officials said they will be getting backing from EU member states, but if it comes to it, they may have to reach out to countries like China. For years now, there's been worries that this machine might create something devastating. Various media outlets suggested that this machine could be capable of creating a black hole, with CERN themselves admitting that although this is unlikely, it could happen. CERN even said that it would be great for science if this happened, as it would give them a chance to study possible extra dimensions. Interestingly, scientists have recently come forward and said that our universe may be nothing more than a silver sitting within the edge of a bubble that's constantly expanding into a higher dimension. Scientists said that human brains cannot truly understand the full scale of the universe, and perhaps never will. The universe extends over many tens of billions of light years, and many people can't wrap their head around this. Understanding the structure of the Milky Way has not been a challenge. The solar system sits on the outer edges of one arm in a disk material, and no one can see across the dense center to the other side. The Milky Way does not sit still, but is constantly rotating. The solar system is always moving through space, meaning the sun and the solar system travel with them. The solar system travels at an average speed of 515,000 miles per hour. Even at this incredible speed, the solar system would take around 230 million years to travel all around the Milky Way. In the observable universe, there's estimated to contain 200 billion to 2 trillion galaxies. This gives you an idea of how monumentally vast the universe is. One startling revelation made by quantum physicists that has converted even the most optimistic individuals is the concept of the multiverse theory. When pondering the mathematical implications and probability of a universe forming as well as other theories in regards to dimensional mathematics, physicists began positing a thought experiment forward. Why did our universe form with these specific rules? With the specific numbers and laws of mathematics? Scientists believe that the odds of this occurring are so astronomical that it's far more probable that every variation of every possible universe exists to allow such occurrences. What's even more interesting is that researchers believe they have evidence of the multiverse theory occurring in the natural world. Given the complete probabilistic determination of quantum mechanics, and its properties such as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and the formation of virtual particles, this could very well mean that every possible variation of every universe and every decision ever made could more than exist, and could potentially one day be explored. Going back to black holes, these massive celestial bodies have interested scientists for years. The theory behind black holes was more than just shrouded in mystery, and it was not until a man by the recognizable name of Albert Einstein helped humanity to realize that space and time are interwoven and connected in something we refer to as the fabric of spacetime. The mathematical theory of mass then being able to stretch and distort this fabric, similar to that of a rock resting on a cloth, led to an innovative idea. When scientists picked up on the gravitational waves, they stated that it allowed them to study astronomical events occurring in the universe. The researchers said that what they were seeing was the merging of a black hole and a neutron star. The moment more study is needed. If this can be confirmed, it's thought this could help us to confirm that black holes and neutron stars can coexist in a binary system. One of the researchers said the following about the event. It's like listening to somebody whisper a word in a busy cafe. It can be difficult to make out the word or even be sure if someone whispered in the first place. What some people may not be aware of is how big some of these black holes are. For example, there's a black hole that's known as SDSSJ. And this black hole is so massive that it's more than 12 billion times the mass of our sun. Researchers began to wonder how such a large singularity forms if our universe is believed to be only 13 billion years old. Today, the black hole continues to be one of the youngest black holes out in space and is believed to be even younger in nature if we were to visit it. However, given the distortion of space and time, it would be another 13 billion light years before any information could catch up and show us its true size. This black hole is incredibly far away. 1 light year is around 5.8 trillion miles, or 9.5 trillion kilometers. So it's fair to say we won't be able to get anywhere near it anytime soon. And said the following about black holes on their website. Another way of revealing extra dimensions would be through the production of microscopic black holes. What exactly we would detect would depend on the number of extra dimensions, the mass of the black hole, the size of the dimensions and energy at which the black hole occurs. If micro-black holes do appear in the collision created by the Large Hadron Collider, they would disintegrate rapidly. Some theorists suggest a particle called the graviton is associated with gravity, in the same way as the photon is associated with the electromagnetic force. If gravitons exist, it should be possible to create them at the Large Hadron Collider, but they would rapidly disappear into extra dimensions. Collisions in particle accelerators always create balanced events, just like fireworks with particles flying out in all directions. A graviton might escape our detection, leaving an empty zone that we notice adds an imbalance in momentum and energy in the event. So what do you make of this news? And do you think we should be building these circular colliders? Some are worried that we are experimenting with things that are beyond our knowledge and that it could have bad consequences, while others have said that we should be going down this path and exploring areas that we don't fully understand, going on to say that it could lead on to bigger discoveries. Christianity has been a dominant religion for thousands of years. It is only natural that elusive mysteries would arise through the ages, from claims of ancient biblical discoveries to modern miracles. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 incredible or inspiring biblical discoveries. A nail that could have been used in Jesus' crucifixion found in a hidden chamber. Silently hidden away in the ground beneath a secret chamber of the Milevskoy Monastery in the Czech Republic were various amazing treasures. Among these relics was a nail that scholars believe may have been used in Jesus Christ's crucifixion. The box was embellished with a 21-carat gold cross and was dated back to 260 AD. Jesus is King was inscribed on the box. Unfortunately, scientists and critics are currently unable to deny or confirm whether the nail was used in the actual crucifixion. But its mere discovery is, in the words of one of the experts involved, even greater than the reliquary of St. Maurice. For the uninitiated, the Maurice reliquary was a gilded box which contained the fragmented body of St. Maurice, St. John the Baptist, and St. Timothy, and was an astonishing historical and religious discovery. One of the people involved in the gilded box's greater nerfing told the Czech News that they had absolutely no idea the relics were hidden due to the fact that the Hussites destroyed the archive, which meant they had no clue that there was anything like it stored away. The concealed chamber's existence is believed to have been a direct result of raids by the Hussites in the 15th century. The chamber was built to protect valuable artifacts owned by the church. Czech experts claim that it is highly possible for the nail to have been used in Jesus' actual crucifixion because the Milev Monastery was one of the richest institutes in the Czech Republic. Consequently, an artifact of such importance could have ended up there at some point in time. Unfortunately, the true authenticity of the nail is yet to be confirmed by other professional scientists and theologians in the field. It should, however, be noted that this is far from the first time where someone has claimed to have uncovered a nail from the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Leonard Woolley and the flood Mesopotamian archaeological evidence, the Mesopotamian flood, has been speculated on for centuries and has been investigated time and time again. The majority of historians assert that the Great Flood occurred during the rise of humanity and was the source of the fabled biblical tale of Noah's Arkansas. During excavations in 1928-29, archaeologists at the historical sites of Ur and Kish unearthed flood deposits which they connected with the flood as according to ancient Hebrew scriptures. Sir Charles Leonard Woolley, a famous British archaeologist, arrived at the scene to investigate further, and it did not take him long to reach his conclusion. It was, in his eyes, proof of the flood. In an excerpt from his 1954 book, he states, "By the time I had written up my notes, I was quite convinced of what it all meant, but I wanted to see whether others would come to the same conclusion. So I brought up 2 of my staff and after pointing out the facts asked for their explanation. They did not know what to say. My wife came along and looked and was asked the same question and she turned away remarking casually, 'Well, of course it's the flood.' The first test pit used by Woolley was tiny, so the following archaeological season he dug up several more test pits, one of which being ridiculously large 75 by 60 feet, and 65 feet deep. In this pit, he found a deposit of clean water-laid soil up to 11 feet thick. Notably, this evidence of the flood was lacking in several other pits in the area, but Woolley wholeheartedly believed that he had found proof of the biblical flood. After only a few years, another discovery was made at a third Mesopotamian site, Shuruppak, where they found a flood stratum. According to myth, Ziusudra Sumerian Noah lived in Shuruppak. This flood residue separated the skeletal remains from the late Proto-Literate and early dynastic period, dating around 2950 and 2850 BCE, though no other Mesopotamian sites have any such evidence. Despite an attempt made by the creationists to decide an exact timeline for biblical events, the Bible lacks any specific dates for the flood that occurred in Genesis or any other mentioned happenings. Stories of the Mesopotamian flood are useful since one is able to draw similarities and contrast differences between the flood of Noah's Ark in Hebrew scriptures and the myth of the Mesopotamian floods and debate whether they were one and the same. Many scholars through the ages have believed wholeheartedly that the similarities between the two provide irrefutable proof of the biblical flood's existence. As such, the widely accepted view is that the original accounts that appear in Genesis arose in Mesopotamia. And this is further proven by the fact that Mesopotamian accounts of such great terrible flood outdate the accounts made in the Bible. Furthermore, the Sumerian king list references a great flood. The king list is a very complicated document which has multiple editions. It's thought that it was created at some point in 2100 BCE. The king list is a report of every monarch and all the dynasties of ancient Mesopotamia, from the origin of kingship which descended from heaven up until the time it was made. However, the list is flawed. The length of each king's reign is impossibly long, and several early dynasties have glaring discrepancies. Even with these mistakes in mind, the Sumerian king list is a valuable document which has preserved names and bloodlines of real, ancient rulers. According to the king list, the flood destroyed everything, cutting through the dynasties until kingship once again descended from heaven, and the list of rulers continued. The majority of modern creationists often choose to ignore the Sumerian king list completely, stating that the Mesopotamian flood does not fall into agreement with the liberalist view of the Genesis flood, primarily the fact that if the Bible is to be taken seriously, Noah and his family were the flood's only survivors. The king list opposes this view. The problem is that if you ignore the evidence provided by the Sumerian king list, then they only support claims of a local flood which would have certainly left survivors. The flood, though intense, was not nearly as large-scale as the Bible claimed its Genesis flood to have been, and though severely destructive, would not have destroyed every human in its vicinity. The question of whether what Leonard Woolley found was the remnants of the biblical flood or simply an unrelated natural disaster has yet to be answered because there is a lack of modern investigation. The flooding of southern Mesopotamia was presumably disastrous enough for stories of a great flood to spread through the country and ancient world. But because the records we have are so old and were passed down by word of mouth for centuries before being written down, many details have surely been exaggerated or simply lost to time. Our Lady of the Pillar. Our Lady of the Pillar is a title given to the Virgin Mary with the ancestral belief that whilst she lived in Jerusalem, Mary bifurcated and appeared to the Apostle James the Greater in 40 AD while he was preaching in the Roman Hispania, now known as modern Spain. The title also refers to the image celebrating the Marian apparition, which lies enshrined in Zaragoza, Aragon, Spain at the Cathedral Basilica. Pope Pius X granted her image an official canonical coronation in 1905. Bilocation is a supernatural spiritual ability where a person manages to be in two places at once using meditation and astral projection. Catholic legend states that in the antiquity of Christianity, the apostles of Jesus traveled through the known world to spread their gospel to the masses. James the Great experienced immense obstacles in his missionary quest, was deeply discouraged, questioning whether he should go on. It is said that one evening as he prayed on the banks of the river Ebro at modern Zaragoza, Mary spiritually traveled to speak with him despite her physical body being in Jerusalem. With her came thousands of angels, all of whom were sent to encourage him to continue his missionary duty. Ancient Roman tombs of early Christians show some of the earliest Marian devotion to Zaragoza, which have images of the Virgin Mary inside. Though the tradition of worshipping the Marian apparition begun in the 15th century, thought to be either in 1434 or 1435, when an inferno destroyed the altarpiece of the church, which was then replaced with a representation of the Marian apparition visiting John the Witch, declared a 7-year indulgence for those who visited Our Lady of the Pillar. In another account, this time by Maria de Aguilera, Mary, Mother of God, was transported from Jerusalem to Hispania on a mystical cloud of angels during the night. It was during this same night that the angels built a grand pillar of marble and created the image of Mary with the baby Messiah. These were but a mere handful of mysterious discoveries, beliefs, and legends, revolving around the Catholic faith, both new and ancient. Who knows what secrets shall be unraveled in the years to come, what miracles and visions are still yet to occur. We will have to wait and see as we ponder over the truth of past myths and rejoice over the discoveries we have made. What do you make of these interesting biblical discoveries? Outer space is referred to as the vast unknown for a good reason. We've made so many developments in the last 20 years and still somehow we know so little. In the grand scheme of things, we have really only barely scratched the surface with space exploration and knowledge. So today here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at these 3 incredible space discoveries. NASA's $1 billion Jupiter probe sent back stunning new photos of Jupiter. When you think of the fact that we're investigating and exploring far-off places in space, how far away do you think it is? 10 million miles? 20? Try 563 million miles. This gaseous giant hasn't been one for close-up photos until pretty recently. Scientists sent a probe to Jupiter in 2015, and it will continue to orbit until at least July of 2021. Its main goal is to map the planet's magnetic and gravitational fields. But there are some pretty incredible bonuses to this. We get to see stunning photos as a result. Juno, the aircraft, flies over Jupiter's cloud tops at speeds 75 times as fast as a bullet. Flyovers, called perihovies, happen once every 54 days. Each time this is repeated, the JunoCam captures incredible photos of the planet, and this information is bounced back to Earth, where people around the world can download the stunning full-color photos. Its gas-swirled clouds are vivid and forever changing, making no two photos alike. This is all a new process, Juno being only the second long-term exploration probe after the Galileo spacecraft, which orbited the planet from 1995 to 2003. Space.com states that Juno is one of NASA's 3 New Frontiers probes. The others are New Horizons, which flew by Pluto in 2015, and OSIRIS-REx, which is expected to fly to asteroid 101955 Bennu in 2020 to collect a sample and return it to Earth. New Frontiers was a program NASA created in 2003 for medium-sized missions that are capped at $1 billion in development and launch costs each. The Curiosity rover, by contrast, costs about $2.5 billion. It also should be noted that Juno is different because it runs on solar power. The same publication writes that Juno launched from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station on August 5, 2011, while 8 other spacecraft have flown in Jupiter's neighborhood in decades past. Part of what makes Juno stand apart is its ability to generate solar power from Jupiter's neighborhood. The other spacecraft relied on nuclear power. This aircraft is accomplishing incredible discoveries and sending us back some beautiful photos while we wait. High schoolers helped discover 4 new alien planets. 2 Massachusetts high schoolers, 16-year-old Kartik Pingley and 18-year-old Jasmine Wright, have helped to discover 4 brand new alien planets. 2021 is already showing incredible promise for being a great year in space exploration. The 2 young adults were in a program called the Student Research Mentoring Program at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which links up high school students with scientists for annually based projects. SRMP Director Clara Souza Silva, a cosmochemist at MIT, said the following in a statement. By the end of the program, the students can say they've done active, state-of-the-art research in astrophysics. Pingley and Wright worked with Tanzu Dailan, a researcher at MIT's Institute for Astrophysics and Space Research. He is also the lead author of the paper that the 2 high schoolers contributed to. They made the discovery by scrutinizing observations of the sun-like star HD 108236 made by TESS. TESS stands for NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite. TESS hunts for alien worlds using the transit method, meaning that the satellite watches for tiny dips in a star's brightness when a planet crosses or transits across its face. Alien planets are not meant to mean planets with alien life on them. These planets are also known as exoplanets, and they are a newer development within the scientific sphere. An exoplanet is a planet that orbits a star other than our Sun. Astronomers have now confirmed over 4,000 exoplanets, but the first one was acknowledged only in 1992. Previously, the orbit of planets around other stars had only been presumed. Space.com reports the statement that, "I was very excited and very shocked," Wright said in the same statement. "We knew this was the goal of Dailan's research, but to actually find a multiplanetary system and be part of the discovering team was really cool." They also share that 3 of the 4 newfound worlds are gaseous planets slightly smaller than Neptune. The 4th is a super-Earth, a rocky planet a bit larger than our own, the researchers said. All 4 exoplanets lie very close to HD 108236. Their orbital periods range from just under 4 Earth days to 19.5 Earth days. In an interview, Dailan said that, "Our species has long been contemplating planets beyond our solar system, and with multiplanetary systems, you're kind of hitting the jackpot," he said in the same statement. The planets originated from the same disk of matter around the same star. But they ended up being different planets with different atmospheres and different climates due to their different orbits. So we would like to understand the fundamental processes of planet formation and evolution using this planetary system. It is pretty incredible how quickly we have reached these kinds of discoveries. Fomalhaut B turns to dust. 1 second it's there and then poof, it's gone. Fomalhaut b, or more formally known as Dagon, is a widely debated candidate exoplanet orbiting the A-type star Fomalhaut. What makes this so interesting is that it is hard to tell what this thing really is. The true nature of Fomalhaut is somewhat of a mystery. It was initially defined as one of the first exoplanets to be directly imaged. It has subsequently been described as a low-mass planet whose surrounding dust cloud is entirely responsible for its detection or debris from a collision of asteroids instead. The initial discovery was made by Hubble in 2005 that saw observations published discussed the structure of Fomalhaut's massive debris belt. But more recently, the headlines don't read exoplanet discovery, but instead exoplanet apparently disappears in latest Hubble observations. Astronomers found themselves in a bizarre predicament where the planet they were studying completely disappeared while they were studying it. The planet was last seen orbiting the star Fomalhaut just 25 light-years away. Hubblesite.org says that a team of researchers from the University of Arizona believe a full-grown planet never existed in the first place. Instead, they concluded that the Hubble Space Telescope was looking at an expanding cloud of very fine dust particles from two icy bodies that smashed into each other. Hubble came along too late to witness the suspected collision but may have captured its aftermath. In 2008, the dot that they thought was a planet had seemingly disappeared from sight. By 2014, the dot was completely gone. No dust or anything to even suggest it might have been there. The conclusion between scientists seems to be that this is caused by the planet actually being inside an icy ring encircling the star. However, the so-called planet at this point is simply an expanding debris cloud itself. Space is a mysterious place, and something new is being examined or discovered every day. But this vast unknown will always be somewhat of an unexplained mystery. But what do you make of these recent space discoveries? For decades, UFO researchers were mocked. The mainstream media and even government officials would often debunk and ridicule those who looked into the subject. The irony of this being that the Pentagon and officials who work on secret projects have now been quite open about the subject and have even gone on record as talking openly about the topic of UFOs, something that many researchers thought would never happen. This change in stance has caused some to question whether they might be releasing some important information in regards to the subject. An amateur researcher by the name of Anthony Bragalia requested a Freedom of Information letters in regards to UAPs, also known as unidentified aero phenomena. Anthony penned a letter to the Defense Intelligence Agency requesting details and UFO material. This included things like debris sightings and crashes. He said the following: "This could include physical debris recovered by personnel of the Department of Defense as residue, flotsam, shot-off material or crashed material from UIPs, and also unidentified flying objects." End quote. In response to this request, the Defense Intelligence Agency shared over 150 pages of information, which included reports on a mysterious memory metal called nitinol, which remembers its original shape when folded. Interestingly, those that have researched the Roswell instance said that those who were cleaning up the crash site that day reported picking up thin pieces of material that when crushed would return to its original shape. Anthony said this document is incredible and that it proves that the U.S. government has retrieved advanced materials from crashes that have extraordinary capabilities. He said the following: "The Pentagon has admitted to holding and testing anomalous debris from UFOs. They have been able to learn some things about the materials of construction, which hold tremendous promise as futuristic materials, which will change our lives forever." End quote. Interestingly, he said that the first Freedom of Information Act requests were submitted back in 2017 and that it took over 3 years for them to reply. He went on to say the following: "The article mentioned that anomalous debris from UFOs, now called UAPs, was being analyzed by a private defense contractor. Material evidence such as UFO debris has been a focus of my research. My Freedom of Information Act request was very specific, seeking the test results of UFO and UAP debris, not materials already known to science." Anthony, like many other UFO researchers, believe that government officials have collected debris from crash sites when they've been reported, and those who have looked into the subject have said there's been a handful of crashes over the last few decades. Amateur researchers have said these UFO crashes don't happen often. But when they do, one of the first to arrive on the scene is that of government officials. Anthony is interested in this note that was described in the document. He said the following: The inclusion of advanced technical reports on nitinol is curious. Nitinol is a shape memory alloy that remembers its original shape when folded or crunched, and snaps back seemingly and instantly. This memory metal characteristic was reported by many witnesses at Roswell. End quote. Back in December, the 45th President of the United States signed a $2.3 trillion relief and government funding bill. It also started the ball rolling on something else. As of that date, U.S. intelligence agencies have just 180 days to release everything they know about unidentified flying objects, a subject that has been thrown into the limelight in recent months. The Director of the National Intelligence and the Secretary are said to have been put on the spot, and will now have to reveal everything they know about these unidentified crafts. It sounds too good to be true, but the call to action is very much real. It's stated that these documents must contain detailed analysis and descriptions of unidentified crafts that have been observed by the Naval Intelligence and also that of the mysterious Unidentified Air Phenomenon Task Force. Interestingly, this build backs up what many UFO researchers have been saying for years, and this is that every other year they open up a new project in order to study and work alongside these crafts. Those who have looked into the phenomena have said that back when Project Blue Book was carried out, officials said at the end of their investigations they didn't find anything of interest, and so shut down the program, saying that nothing was found and it wasn't worth their time and energy. However, fast forward a couple of decades and numerous UFO programs have been opened up to look into the phenomena, with researchers noting that these are only the ones we know about. It's fair to say then that government officials are interested in these graphs, and clearly think it's worth the time, effort, and money to further investigate whatever these things are. Due to recent announcements in regards to this subject, it's caused some to say that UFOs need to be taken more seriously, and that the stigma around those that study them needs to be dropped, with amateur researchers saying the irony is that government officials are perhaps the ones that are most interested in these objects, spending billions of dollars over the years in order to study them and gather as much evidence as possible. Some have said the former president is going all out and wants to reveal the truth to the public about what's really going on. Others, though, within the UFO community are not sure if any information will be released, with one UFO researcher saying the following: "On paper, it's very exciting that this announcement has been released. But the bottom line is that they won't release any information they don't want to. It's sad because people are getting excited by this news, and I can see why. But in my opinion, judging on how people have acted this year, and how easily offended people get, do you think we're ready to be told that we could be part of something much bigger? It's not going to happen. The only thing that will be revealed is probably a little more information on the program they were running. Stuff that many of us are already aware of. In my opinion, the majority of the world's certainly not ready for the truth." End quote. So what do you make of these recent documents? Do you think the US government and the Pentagon have knowledge of these crafts? And do you think in the near future more information will be released about these unidentified flying objects? Artificial intelligence is machinery demonstrating intelligence comparable to humankind. Because natural intelligence is so interconnected with consciousness and emotionality, when computers are programmed to mimic the human mind, the simulation can come across as very unsettling. Some of the anxiety around AI stems from the fact that it could lead to mass unemployment, the possibility that it could be used for dangerous and destructive purposes, and the idea that AI could become self-aware and humans will be unable to control or deal with the moral implications of it. Upcoming artificial intelligence might make you think twice about how convenient and harmless Siri really is. So today on Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 creepy things artificial intelligence has done. Creepy artificial intelligence created portrait that fetches $432,500 at auction. In October 2018, a major auction house sold a portrait that they estimated for as little as $7,000. It ended up selling at $432,500. The signature on the lower right-hand side was a small section of the code that was used to create the piece of art. The equation was written by a collective known as Obvious Art. 15,000 portraits were fed into the system between the 14th to the 20th century. The product is what some might describe as distressing, a portrait known as Edmund de Bellamy, an entirely imaginary man from a completely fictitious family. The whole familial line is painted in the old master style à la Rembrandt with distorted features and unusually blurry faces. The generator makes new paintings based on the data it is fed, and the discriminator then tries to decipher whether or not a given painting is real or fake. The less certain that the discriminator is about an artificial painting, the more likely it is to look authentic. This is not the first example of artificial intelligence artists testing the limits and possibilities of computer-generated creativity. In fact, a section of the code sparked a bit of controversy because it was borrowed from another AI artist, Robbie Barrett. The 19-year-old code was shared under an open-source license, so the parameters of ownership are unclear. The highest bidder on this piece was a phone buyer who wished to be kept anonymous. They were one of 5 parties who were bidding on the work. While the signature at the bottom refers to the generative adversarial network itself, the actual authorship is up for debate. Is this the product of a computer, the men who programmed it, or the influences it was fed? Artificial intelligence evolved creepy images to please a monkey's brain. Extreme is an artificial intelligence algorithm thought up by the brains of Harvard. Its purpose is to stimulate specific neurons in a monkey's brain that are associated with facial recognition. The equation is then adjusted as the primate watches a screen that spits out images representative of which neurons were firing. This works by shuffling images and, depending on how strong the neurological response is, using that information to create a new set of synthetic images. This particular test was done on a monkey named Duringo in April of 2018. Gradually, the screen went from showing gray and shapeless images to ones that the researchers found much easier to interpret. While the visuals are unnerving and obscure to the human eye, they obviously resemble aspects of facial features. The neuroscientists started recognizing what they think could be the images of a monkey kept in a nearby vicinity and a caretaker that looks after them. The aforementioned Ringo regularly came into contact with. The experiment is meant to provide a range of forms and a visual lexicon that is impartial to our human viewpoint. While it is impossible to remove human perspective entirely, in terms of interpretation of data, this study has eliminated a lot of the biases that previously neuroscientists were working against. They were even able to limit their partiality in interpretation by running the provoked images through another algorithm that compared the synthetic images with natural photos to confirm whether they were actually seeing the characteristics of a face that they thought they were. Stephen Hawking warned artificial intelligence could end mankind. For years, Hollywood has played on our fear of technology matching or surpassing human evolution, but in recent years, some of the world's leading minds in AI have confirmed that these feelings are not entirely unwarranted. While many believe that humans can remain in control of technology and use it to solve a multitude of problems, the late Stephen Hawking was weary. While he agreed that technological advancement promoted extraordinary progress in so many long-standing global issues, he also suggested that our biological evolution, which is comically slow in comparison to the rate at which an algorithm can redesign itself, simply could not compete. Others have similar reservations. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Steve Wozniak are also worried about the danger that rapid technology advancements present. These are the minds that pioneer the technology frontier. Hawking, who was told as early as 1963 that he didn't have much longer to live, passed only a few years ago in 2018. He is widely known as the most brilliant theoretical physicist of his time, often being compared to the likes of Einstein. Hawking believed that AI was a life in and of itself that could improve and reproduce itself. He warns that computers could in fact replace the human species entirely. The astrophysicist felt, however, that there were in fact many man-made potential threats to humankind. Climate change, overpopulation, and the risks of communicating with life outside of our planet among them. Hawking was quoted at the Web Summit Technology Conference in Portugal saying that success in creating effective AI could be the biggest event in the history of our civilization. Or the worst. We just don't know. So we cannot know if we will be infinitely helped by AI or ignored by it and sidelined or conceivably destroyed by it. In order to prevent the worst-case scenario, Hawking suggested that we aggressively focus on legislature to establish boundaries that will help keep us safe by implementing best practices and responsible management. Artificial intelligence is a revolutionary advancement that can be used to solve so many of the world's problems. But when AI is able to imitate natural intelligence and impersonate consciousness, as well as it has over the past few years, it does make some people a little uncomfortable. We have no way of knowing what AI holds for us in the future. So many of our anxieties simply stem from a general fear of the unknown. The best way forward is cautiously, optimistically, and with an eye for progress and a heart for, and who knows, maybe Siri ends up being exactly as harmless as you thought all along. But what do you make of these 3 creepy things artificial intelligence has done?